Hi, my name is Todd Caldwell. I'm Director of Audit Services with the Indiana State Board of Accounts. We thank you for taking the time out to view this webinar, the topic of which is bank reconcilements. Performing a reconcilement of the accounting records you are now responsible for to the bank balances is an important step in what a clerk treasurer does. It ensures your records match the activity in your bank account and that all financial activity of your city or town is being recorded. Reconciling is such an important part of your duties that the Indiana General Assembly created a law requiring you to do so. Indiana Code 5-13-6-1E requires you to reconcile the balance of your accounting records or ledger to the bank balances at least monthly. During an audit, we're going to examine that the reconciliations are performed monthly and that they, in fact, reconcile. We see a fair amount of findings in our audit reports related to reconcilements, from not being done at all, which I've seen personally when I was out in the field auditing, and there were, back in the day when every bank mailed a bank statement to the local unit. I've gone in to do an audit and found bank statements for several months not even opened out of the envelope. So that clerk treasurer in that example is not doing a bank reconcilement at all. We also see cases where it's not fully reconciled, meaning there's some kind of unidentified variance. There's an offage. And you shouldn't have any kind of variance. If you do, it should be attempts to identify it should be made. Everything that happens at the bank should be reflected on your records and vice versa. And we've also seen a fair amount of cases where there's no one else involved in the process. Internal controls in those cases don't contain evidence of someone else being involved. And we'll talk a little bit more about that before we're done. So if you reconcile your personal checking account to your bank statement balance, this isn't anything new. It's just like that, except instead of your personal checking account ledger, you are reconciling the city or town's ledger to the bank balances. So in the illustration, you can see that the cash book or ledger has a balance as of a certain date of $1,500, and the bank statement balance at the same date is $1,760. That difference of $260 needs identified so as to reconcile the two. So let's go over some of the basics in a reconcilement and what we might look for during an audit. If your city or town has a computerized accounting system, the system most likely has a reconcilement feature within it. When you reconcile electronically, you will have all the basic information we are going to cover here. It's just going to be in electronic format. That electronic reconcilement will need to be available for our field examiners to look at during an audit of your city or town. You can also use another template or a hand reconcilement if you wish. You will need to use a handwritten approach if you have hand-posted records instead of a computerized accounting system. If doing the reconcilement by hand, you can use what you see on the screen, the back of the bank statement. This one is a copy of what appears on my personal bank statement. If you get a statement in the mail, usually there's some kind of template on the back. If you get your statement electronically, most websites, bank websites, and your account will have some sort of template that's available that you can print and write out if you need to. But whether you have a computerized accounting system and electronic reconcilements that your computer does, or if you write out that reconcilement, your monthly reconcilement should be documented each month and available for us during an audit. Even if you have so little activity in a month that you don't have any outstanding checks or deposits in transit as of the cutoff date, in which case the bank balance happens to equal your ledger balance exactly, you still need to document the fact that you've done a reconcilement and that the two agree and have that documentation. So here's an example that we're going to go through. It's a very basic, and this one only has one bank account. And what you see is the top portion of a longer document that we're going to see eventually. But for right now, we're going to go line by line. And this one is for the month of March 2019. In the format that I am using for this example, we're starting with the bank statement balance at March 31st, 2019. Other formats might start with the ledger balance and work to the bank balance. I'll show you that one in a bit. And I'll show you one in a little bit that really starts with both, that kind of reconciles the both of them. But as I mentioned in this example, we only have one account. If you have multiple bank accounts, the concept would be the same, and you'd list each account here and then reconcile. And I'll have an example of that as well later. So for this example, we have deposits in transit. These are monies you have collected, posted as a receipt to your ledger, taken to the bank and deposited, but due to the timing, the deposit doesn't show on your bank statement as of the cutoff date, and therefore it's not included in your statement balance. So because it's on your ledger but not in the bank yet, you've got to account for that difference by means of the reconcilement. And in this case, because these amounts aren't in your bank balance, you'll want to add them here because we're starting with the bank account balance and reconciling. For this example, we also have some outstanding checks. These are checks you've written and posted as a disbursement to your ledgers that haven't been paid or haven't cleared the bank. So the bank balance still has this money in your account. So because of that, and because it's not in your ledger balance, you need to subtract it here. Expanding the entire document a little in this picture, most months are going to have some kind of reconciling items. These are items not normally associated with monthly activity. They're things other than deposits in transit and outstanding checks, like perhaps interest or NSF fees, service fees, or encoding errors. For interest, this may or may not be a reconciling item for you. It depends on how you record it and when. For this example, the clerk treasurer doesn't post interest earned until the following month. So since the amount would be on the bank statement and not on the ledger at the end of the month, it must be included as a reconciling item here. In this example, the bank encoded a couple of checks incorrectly, so you need to adjust for them. In the first example, the encoding error took too much out of your account, so to reconcile, you'll need to add it back until they make that correction. And in the second, you had a deposit that they actually put too much money in your account, so in this case, you need to take it out. Those are the bottom two there with the encoding errors. With the first one being the bank runs a check that you wrote for $110.10, but they encoded it as $110 even, which means they took out $9.90 too much. And in the bottom example, they ran a deposit that you recorded as $55.55 as $55.65, thereby they gave you a dime too much, so you've got to account for that. If you have trouble reconciling at first, double check and make sure the amount you have for deposits and checks agrees with the amount of the checks and deposits per the bank statement. Sometimes it's easy to overlook if there are a couple of similar numbers or transpositions that you need to account for. After adding the balance, all of the adjustments, and reconciling items, you come to a subtotal or an adjusted bank balance, shown here at the arrow. So here is that section just enlarged so you can see it. The subtotal or the adjusted bank balance is $69,873.36. You compare that to your ledger balance at March 31st, $69,873.36, and you have zero variance, and that's what you're hoping for. To help out with the documentation of the reconcilement itself, we've listed in this example 5 different funds that the town has. You may have many more than this, but it shows the ledger balance for the general fund, MVH, motor vehicle highway, local road and street, park and water utilities as of March 31st. So each of these funds, individual funds, has a balance that totals this amount. So when we're talking about your ledger balance at March 31st, that's the balance of all funds. But you can see this $69,873 up above, and each of the 5 funds totaled is $69,873. If the total of all funds doesn't match the subtotal or the adjusted bank balance, then there would be an amount on the difference line, and that would need further investigation to find out why it doesn't reconcile. There's an error somewhere, either on your end or the bank's end, that needs to be identified. Here's another method. This uses the back of the bank statement that I showed you earlier. It makes adjustments to the ledger balance first instead of the bank balance in the top section. Then it adjusts to the bank statement amount in the lower section. And the adjusted amounts in each section are in the yellow boxes, and they should agree. So I've used the same information from the previous example. I've just put them either in the top section if you're adjusting the ledger balance, in the bottom section if you're adjusting the bank statement balance. And when you get these two to equal, then you know you've reconciled. And I've also included those 5 different funds that we had, so you can see the ledger balance of $69,873 is up at the top, and that's what we started with in this particular format. I mentioned earlier, if you had more than one bank account, let's say you had a checking account for your city or town business, and a separate one for your water utility, and a third bank account for your sewage utility. In the format that I've shown you, you would list all accounts at the beginning of your reconcilement. So you can see this is what we started with: general account balance, $74,000. We've added these 2 other checking accounts for water and sewer. Then you would continue down the reconcilement and list all the deposits in transit for each of the 3 accounts, all the outstanding checks for each of the 3 accounts, and any reconciling items on each of the 3 accounts. Then you would eventually again get down to a ledger balance and a difference. Hopefully it's 0, but I tried to show that ledger balance. I've added these 2 funds because we have a water utility and a sewage utility. And you can see how added in the total of all of your funds comes down to $80,861.04, which is the amount, the ledger balance shown above, $80,861.04. I mentioned internal controls before, and we have a separate video that goes into much more detail than what we have here. For reconcilements, your internal controls and procedures need to be in writing. The important thing to remember about reconcilements and internal controls is to get someone else involved in the reconciling process to review the completed reconcilement and bank statement. This could be a deputy treasurer, a council member, or even the clerk treasurer of a neighboring city or town. Your internal controls are weakened if one person has the ability to receive money, make deposits, post receipts and disbursements to the ledger, and do the bank reconcilement. So getting at least one other person involved mitigates those risks involved. Make sure to document the other person's involvement by a signature or initials on the reconcilement, or maybe they send you an email that says, I've reviewed this and don't have any questions. Those emails or those signatures or initials are going to be the evidence we want to see that your controls are working. So if your controls are that Jane Doe reviews the reconcilement after you complete it, Jane either needs to sign an initial or something, maybe email you, and then you keep that so that when we're testing your internal controls during an audit and you tell us, well, the process is I do the reconcilement and Jane Doe reviews it, we can see if that's actually happening or not. We see a lot of findings that while the reconcilements are being conducted, there isn't evidence of someone else being involved in the process, and that internal controls were insufficient. Well, that concludes this video on bank reconcilements. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me, Todd Caldwell, or Susan Gordon at cities.towns@sboa.in.gov or 317-232-2513. And we thank you for your time and look forward to working with you.